Imagine standing at the gates of the most advanced city in the ancient world. Walls so thick, chariots raced across the top of them. Gardens so spectacular, they made the list of world wonders. A king so confident in his power, he laughed at the idea of defeat. Right up until the night everything collapsed. But here is the part nobody talks about. That collapse was written down, centuries before it happened, word for word, almost exactly as it occurred. To understand why Babylon matters, you have to go back to the beginning. And the beginning is stranger than most people realize. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more awe-inspiring stories of faith, survival, and miracles. Around 2300 BC, in the flat sun-baked land between two rivers, the Tigris and the Euphrates, a small settlement began to grow. The land was called Mesopotamia, which simply means the land between the rivers. And in that land, cities were rising faster than anywhere else on Earth. Babylon started as nothing special, a minor city, a dot on a map surrounded by bigger, more powerful neighbors. The Sumerians had already built remarkable cities nearby. The Akkadians had already created one of the world's first empires. Babylon was, at first, just another settlement trying to survive. But then came a king who changed everything. His name was Hammurabi, and he did something that no ruler in that part of the world had done quite so boldly before. He didn't just conquer cities, he connected them. Under Hammurabi, Babylon became the center of a unified kingdom stretching across Mesopotamia. Trade routes converged there, taxes flowed there, power concentrated there. And then he did something even more remarkable. He wrote the rules down. The Code of Hammurabi, 282 laws carved into an 8-foot stone pillar, became one of the earliest legal systems in recorded history. Laws about wages, about property, about marriage and divorce, about what happens when a builder constructs a house that collapses and kills the owner. This was not a primitive society guessing its way through civilization. This was organized, deliberate, and calculated power. But Hammurabi's Babylon was just the opening act. The empire would rise, fall, get swallowed by other powers, and then, centuries later, rise again. Bigger, more dangerous. And this time, it would catch the attention of prophets who would write things about this city that still make historians stop and stare. Because what they wrote should not have been possible to know. Fast forward about 1,000 years. Babylon had been conquered, rebuilt, conquered again, and rebuilt again. Assyria had dominated the region with brutal military force, burning cities, deporting entire populations, ruling through terror. But by 612 BC, the Assyrian Empire collapsed under its own weight and the pressure of combined enemies. Into that power vacuum stepped Babylon again. A new king took the throne. His name was Nebuchadnezzar II. And under his rule, Babylon didn't just recover. It became something the ancient world had never quite seen before. Nebuchadnezzar was not simply a military commander. He was a builder, a strategist, and a man obsessed with legacy. He wanted Babylon to be remembered forever, and he came terrifyingly close to achieving that. His army was one of the most effective fighting forces of the ancient world. In 605 BC, he defeated Egypt at the Battle of Carchemish, a victory that shocked the entire region and announced that a new superpower had arrived. From there, his empire expanded rapidly. Judah, Syria, parts of Egypt, all fell under Babylonian control. But conquest was only half the story. Back in Babylon itself, Nebuchadnezzar was transforming the city into something extraordinary. The walls were reinforced until they became almost mythological in size. The Ishtar Gate, covered in brilliant blue-glazed bricks and decorated with golden animals, became one of the most spectacular entrances to any city in history. Processional roads were built for religious ceremonies, massive temples rose toward the sky, and then there were the Hanging Gardens. Whether they truly existed as described is still debated by historians. But the fact that ancient writers from multiple cultures all described them, without having reason to coordinate their stories, suggests something remarkable was built there. This was the height of Babylonian power, a city at the center of the known world, a king who seemed unstoppable. And yet, at the very peak of all this greatness, voices were already warning that it would not last. Voices that had no political reason to lie, no military intelligence to draw from, just words, written down, waiting. It is worth pausing here to understand just how advanced Babylon was, because this context makes what comes next even more startling. The city covered roughly 2,500 acres. That is larger than many modern cities. At its peak, some estimates place the population at over 200,000 people, making it quite possibly the largest city on Earth at that time. The outer walls were wide enough that 2 chariots could pass each other on top. The inner walls were even thicker. The Greek historian Herodotus, who visited the region and gathered accounts of Babylon, described it in terms that sound almost like fantasy. And yet, archaeology has confirmed many of the basic details. The city was laid out in a deliberate grid, streets crossed at right angles. There was a sophisticated drainage system. Temples, palaces, and markets were organized with clear intent. This was not a city that grew randomly. It was designed. The Euphrates River ran directly through the city, controlled by massive gates that could be closed to cut off water flow, or opened to flood attacking armies. Or Babylon's engineers had essentially turned a natural resource into a weapon. Trade made it wealthy beyond measure. Merchants from as far as India and Egypt passed through its markets. Textiles, metals, grain, spices, everything valuable in the ancient world moved through Babylon at some point. And at the center of it all stood Esagila, the great temple complex dedicated to Marduk, Babylon's chief god. Nebuchadnezzar believed Marduk had chosen him personally. That divine approval was not just religious belief, it was political currency. It told every citizen and every conquered nation, same thing. Babylon is eternal. Babylon cannot fall. Except certain writings disagreed, and those writings were specific in ways that made no logical sense, unless someone actually knew what was coming. Here is where the story shifts, and where it gets genuinely difficult to explain away. Centuries before Babylon reached its peak power, writers were recording detailed predictions about its future. Not vague warnings, not general statements about the dangers of pride or power. Specific, detailed, named. The prophet Isaiah, writing in the 8th century BC, roughly 150 years before Babylon became the dominant world power, described its coming destruction in striking detail. He named the city. He described it becoming like Sodom and Gomorrah. He wrote that it would never be inhabited again, that no Arab would pitch a tent there, that shepherds would not rest their flocks there. That is an oddly specific set of predictions for a city that, at the time of writing, was not even the most powerful city in the region. But it gets stranger. Isaiah also referenced a conqueror who would bring Babylon down. And in one passage, he used a name, Cyrus, a Persian king, written down approximately 150 years before that king was even born. Now, historians who approach this from a purely secular angle argue about the dating of these texts. That debate is real and ongoing. But even setting aside the most contested claims, the pattern of these prophecies matching historical events remains remarkable enough that scholars across belief systems have written extensively about it. Then came Jeremiah, writing closer to Babylon's actual peak. His descriptions of the city's fall were more detailed still. He wrote that Babylon's warriors would stop fighting, that its defenses would fail, that it would fall in a single night, that the surrounding nations would hear its fall and not mourn it. These were not safe predictions. Babylon was the most fortified city in the world. Predicting its fall was not a reasonable bet. And yet, the night those predictions described eventually came. And when it did, it unfolded in a way that still makes military historians raise their eyebrows. Because the method of Babylon's fall was not what anyone expected. The year is 539 BC. Babylon is still the most powerful city on Earth. Its walls are legendary. Its army is battle-hardened. Inside the city, King Belshazzar, grandson of Nebuchadnezzar, is hosting a feast. Not a small gathering, a massive royal celebration. Thousands of guests, wine flowing, music playing. The mood is confident, almost defiant. Persian forces under Cyrus the Great have been camped outside the city for a while, but nobody inside is particularly worried. The walls would hold. They always held. What Belshazzar did not know, or perhaps chose to ignore, was that Cyrus's engineers had been working on the Euphrates River upstream, the river that ran through the city, the same river that Babylon's engineers had once turned into a defensive weapon, was about to be turned against them. Cyrus diverted the river, reduced its flow enough that his soldiers could wade through the water channel that ran under the city walls. And on the night of the feast, while the celebration continued inside, Persian soldiers moved through the riverbed, under the walls, and into the city. Babylon fell in a single night. No epic siege, no battering rams breaking through legendary walls. The walls were never breached. The city was entered from beneath, through the very river that was supposed to protect it. Jeremiah had written that Babylon's warriors would stop fighting, that its defenses would fail. Historical accounts confirm that large portions of the Babylonian army either surrendered or simply did not resist. The city, for all its fortifications, collapsed almost without a battle. Cyrus entered Babylon, and, much like Cyrus's treatment of other conquered peoples, he did not destroy it. He presented himself as a liberator. He respected the local temples. He allowed exiled peoples to return home. The city survived, but its power was finished. And the prophecies were not done with it yet. This is the part that historians struggle to file neatly away. The fall of Babylon to Cyrus in 539 BC fulfilled several elements of what had been written, but some of the prophecies described something beyond a political defeat. They described permanent, total desolation, a city that would never be rebuilt, never be lived in again, reduced to nothing but ruins and wild animals. That did not happen in 539 BC. Babylon continued to function as a major city for centuries after Cyrus took it. Alexander the Great visited it. He actually planned to make it the capital of his empire. He died there in 323 BC before those plans could be carried out. So for a long time, the prophecy of total desolation seemed unfulfilled. But then something gradual began to happen. After Alexander's death, his generals fought over the empire. A new city, Seleucia, was built nearby and deliberately designed to pull population and commerce away from Babylon. It worked. Slowly, over generations, Babylon's population declined. Trade moved elsewhere. Temples fell into disrepair. By the time of Christ, the city that had once held 200,000 people was largely empty. Within a few more centuries, it was essentially abandoned. Today, the site of ancient Babylon sits in modern Iraq, roughly 85 kilometers south of Baghdad. What remains are ruins, excavated by archaeologists over the last 2 centuries. The Iraqi government has made attempts to restore parts of the site, but no permanent, thriving city has risen there again. No Arab pitches a tent there for long. The area is not ideal for grazing flocks. These are small details, easy to dismiss individually, but stacked together, the method of the fall, the single night, the warriors not fighting, the eventual complete desolation, the pattern becomes harder to explain as coincidence. And here is the detail that historians almost never mention in popular accounts. Babylon does not just appear in ancient prophecy as a past event. In several texts, Babylon appears as a symbol, a concept that points forward, not just to a fallen city, but to something still coming. After the Persians came the Greeks. After the Greeks came the Parthians. After the Parthians came the Romans. Each empire that rose to dominate the ancient world passed through the shadow of what Babylon had been, and each one borrowed from it. The administrative systems Babylon developed, taxation, record-keeping, provincial governance, were studied and adapted by every empire that followed. Roman law has roots that trace back through Greek thought, which itself drew from Near Eastern models, many of which passed through Babylon. Even the calendar most of the modern world uses today has ancient Mesopotamian fingerprints on it. The 7-day week, the 60-minute hour, the 360-degree circle. These did not come from Greece or Rome. They came from the civilization that Babylon inherited and perfected. But there is another layer to Babylon's afterlife that goes beyond administrative systems and calendar math. Babylon became a symbol, a shorthand, a word that meant something beyond its geography. In the writings that came out of the Jewish exile, the period when Nebuchadnezzar had taken the people of Judah captive and brought them to Babylon, the city took on a meaning that transcended politics. It represented a world system built on pride, power, and the rejection of anything higher than human ambition. That symbolic meaning did not die when the city fell. It traveled. It showed up in Roman-era writings. It appeared in early Christian texts. And in one of the most widely read and most debated books of prophecy ever written, Babylon appears again, not as a memory, as a warning. The Book of Revelation, written in the 1st century AD, describes a future entity it calls Babylon the Great. Scholars have argued for 2,000 years about what exactly this refers to. Some say it was a coded reference to Rome, the dominant empire at the time of writing, persecuting early Christians, built on 7 hills just as the text describes. That interpretation has serious historical support. Others argue the language goes beyond Rome, that the description of a global economic and political system, one that controls trade, influences nations, and ultimately collapses suddenly, points to something not yet fully seen in history. What is striking is the language used. The text describes merchants standing at a distance, watching this Babylon burn, weeping because no one buys their goods anymore. A sudden economic collapse, a system so intertwined with global commerce that when it falls, the entire trading world goes into shock. Rome fell, but it did not fall in a single hour. It declined over centuries. So the debate continues. And it is not a fringe debate. Theologians, historians, and scholars of ancient literature have filled libraries with competing interpretations. What is agreed upon, across belief systems, is that Babylon as a concept has proven remarkably durable. A city that has been physically ruins for over 1,000 years continues to show up in political speeches, religious warnings, and cultural references worldwide. Something about Babylon refuses to stay buried, and the reason why might be closer to the present than most people realize. Here is what gets lost in most discussions of Babylon. The city was not destroyed because it was weak. It was destroyed at the height of its strength. The walls were still standing. The army was still intact. The wealth was still there. And yet it fell in a single night through a method nobody saw coming, through the very thing designed to protect it. That pattern, power at its peak, collapse from within, fall through an unexpected vulnerability, has repeated throughout history with a consistency that is either deeply instructive or deeply unsettling, depending on how you look at it. Every empire that has called itself eternal has eventually stood where Babylon stood, confident, celebrated, surrounded by walls it believed no one could breach. And every time, the river found a way in. The prophecies about Babylon's past have largely played out. The city is ruins. The desolation is real. The details align in ways that continue to generate serious academic attention. But the prophecies about what Babylon represents, what it symbolizes as a system, a structure, a way of organizing human power, those are still being debated. Not because the evidence is thin, because the evidence points somewhere that makes people uncomfortable. The Forgotten Kingdom was never really about one city in ancient Iraq. It was always about what that city represented, and whether that same spirit, that same system, is being rebuilt somewhere right now, in plain sight.